Julian Croft thought firing me was just another line item on his restructuring budget. He didn't understand that you can't streamline the very bedrock your billion-dollar mountain rests on. 14 days was all it took for my silence to become the seismic event that fractured his empire. When I whispered, "Thank you," in that boardroom, no one realized it wasn't surrender. It was the pressure building before the quake. They saw a dismissed scientist walking away. They didn't see the geologist who had mapped the fault lines of their own corporate greed years before. My name is Josie Lowe, and I designed the Ethelred process, the revolutionary extraction method that made Terravex minerals worth $3 billion. 8 years of my life, my knowledge of deep earth chemistry and sustainable geology, were encoded into every sensor, every formula, every molecule of the biocatalyst that powered their flagship operation. But on that Wednesday afternoon at 2:15, none of that mattered anymore. The boardroom smelled of recycled air and ambition when I walked in. 15 executives sat around a sterile glass and steel table, their faces arranged into masks of detached professionalism. At the head sat Julian Croft, our new CEO, hired 4 months ago to maximize short-term gains. His tailored suit probably cost more than a year's worth of seismic sensor maintenance. His smile cost even more, the kind that promised efficiency while hiding a deep contempt for anything that couldn't be quantified in a quarterly report. "Josie," he said, gesturing to a single chair placed noticeably apart from the main group. The isolation was intentional. I was no longer part of the geological survey team. I was the specimen under the microscope. I sat, my hands resting calmly on the portfolio I'd brought. Inside were 8 years of performance reviews, all stellar. 8 years of environmental compliance reports, all perfect. 8 years of building the very foundation they now claim to stand on. But I knew. The tectonic plates had already shifted. The decision was made long before I stepped into this room. "We appreciate you coming on such short notice," Julian continued, his voice smooth as polished granite. "As you know, Terravex is entering a new era of operational efficiency. We need to position ourselves to be more aggressive in the current market." Aggressive, the corporate euphemism for plundering. "Your contributions to this company have been," he paused, searching for a word that would sound gracious while meaning nothing, "foundational. The Ethelred process you developed has been instrumental to our success." The board members gave faint, synchronized nods of sympathy. Howard Vance, my old mentor who had championed my promotion to chief geologist just last year, suddenly found the grain of the wood on the wall fascinating. However, Julian said, and there it was, the word that signaled the landslide, "We're restructuring our extraction division. We'll be bringing in external consultants with more cost-effective approaches to resource management." Cost-effective, as if the process that extracted lithium with a 99% purity and 0 water table contamination was somehow extravagant. As if the system with a flawless environmental record was outdated. "The board has decided to eliminate the position of chief geologist," he continued, effective immediately. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. I felt the weight of 15 pairs of eyes on me, waiting for a reaction. They were waiting for outrage, for pleading, for the tremor of a career collapsing. I gave them nothing. Furthermore, Julian added, a note of satisfaction in his voice, "will require you to transition all operational data and access credentials to the new team. Apex Extraction will be taking over management of the Nevada site." Apex Extraction. The name hit me like a physical blow. They were corporate raiders disguised as geologists, known for strip mining and leaving behind ecological dead zones. "We've prepared a severance package." He slid a folder across the glass table. 4 months, salary, conditional on signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement and a 5-year non-compete clause. Quite generous, all things considered. Considering the circumstances. As if firing the architect of their entire technological and ecological viability was just another Wednesday. I opened the folder, my eyes scanning the dense legal text. The NDA was designed to bury knowledge. The non-compete was designed to erase me from the industry I had helped redefine. "Do you have any questions?" Julian asked, already shuffling his papers, his mind on the next item on his agenda. To him, I was just a resource to be depleted and discarded. I closed the folder and looked up, meeting his cold eyes for the first time. He had the self-satisfied look of a man who thought he'd just won, who believed he was demonstrating strength by cutting away the company's conscience. He had no idea what he'd just done. "No questions," I said, my voice as steady as a deep earth core sample. The room's atmosphere shifted. They expected a fight, demands, threats of a lawsuit. My calm unnerved them more than an outburst ever could. I stood, leaving the severance package untouched on the table. "Thank you," I whispered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. The words landed with the quiet finality of a settled fault line. Julian's confidence wavered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. Thank you wasn't on his flowchart. Thank you suggested I knew something they didn't. Thank you implied this was not an ending, but a beginning. Howard finally looked at me then, a question in his weary eyes. But I was already walking toward the door, my heels clicking on the floor in a rhythm that sounded almost like a countdown. As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. The room of executives sat frozen, a tableau of corporate myopia. "Oh," I added, as if remembering a minor detail. "You might want to review the EPA compliance filings for the Ethelred patent." Specifically Rider 11B. Then I walked out, leaving them to wonder what kind of seismic charge I had just armed with those words. They thought they were burying me. They had no idea they'd just handed me the detonator. And in 7 days, they would understand that firing me wasn't their power move. It was the trigger for their own extinction event. The elevator doors closed on my 8 years at TerraVex. I wasn't leaving as a victim. I was leaving as an architect who had built more than just an extraction process. I'd built an insurance policy, a geological failsafe buried in a legal document nobody bothered to read anymore. Julian Croft had just made a $3 billion mistake. He just didn't know it yet. The afternoon sun hit my face as I stepped out of the TerraVex tower, washing away the corporate dust I'd worn for 8 years. A security guard I'd known for years wouldn't meet my eye as he held the door. By the time I reached my apartment overlooking the city, my phone had already erupted. "Leo Vance, my protege. Josie, what the hell just happened? They've locked us out of the real-time seismic monitors and announced you're gone. Dr. Eris Thorne, the lead chemist on my team. Josie, this is insanity. How can they fire the only person who understands the catalyst's delicate balance?" Another text from Leo. "The team is in shock. Julian just told us consultants from Apex are taking over." Apex. "For your system, it's malpractice." I set the phone on my kitchen counter and watched the messages flood in. 42 texts in 15 minutes, 9 missed calls. My team, my former team, was panicking. They were right to. They just didn't know the full extent of the danger yet. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, the good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion. This qualified as both a disaster and a celebration. My personal laptop sat on the table, encrypted and completely firewalled from TerraVex's network. I had learned a long time ago in this industry to keep my own meticulous records. Loyalty in the world of corporate mining had the half-life of a radioactive isotope. The bourbon burned, a welcome, grounding sensation. Outside, the city sprawled beneath the clear sky, indifferent to the quiet dramas playing out in its glass towers. I'd spent 8 years in one of those towers, building something that mattered, something that proved profit and planetary health didn't have to be mutually exclusive. Now, I was just another casualty of a hostile takeover, another LinkedIn profile soon to be updated with exploring new opportunities. Doubt, a cold and creeping thing, tried to find a fissure in my resolve. Maybe I should have fought them in there. Maybe I should have laid out the catastrophic risks, threatened to go to the press, demanded a real explanation. Maybe I should have just taken their money and disappeared. My reflection in the window showed a woman who looked tired but not defeated. 36 years old, married to my work because the Earth had been a more reliable partner than any man I'd ever met. I'd given TerraVex everything, and they discarded me like spent ore. The phone buzzed again. Another text from Eris. "Julian's bringing in Apex Extraction. A bunch of corporate butchers. Nobody's even heard of them doing sustainable work. This stinks, Josie. Apex Extraction." I opened my laptop and ran a quick search. Their history was a trail of environmental fines, lawsuits from local communities, and a reputation for prioritizing speed over safety. Their CEO, an old fraternity brother of Julian Croft. The cronyism was so blatant it was insulting. More messages poured in. The junior geologists were scared. The senior chemists were furious. Without me to shield them, they knew Apex would gut the department, justifying their exorbitant fees by dismantling my carefully constructed safety protocols. I walked to my home office, where 8 years of my life's work lined the shelves. The patent certificate for the Ethelred process. A photo of my team after our first successful, zero-impact extraction. Framed geological map of the Nevada site, a place I knew better than my own backyard. all monuments to a career that had just been declared extinct. But there, in the bottom drawer of my fireproof safe, locked away since I'd filed the patent 5 years ago, was the binder that truly mattered. The one marked Ethelred Patent, EPA Compliance Addendums. The one containing Rider 11B. I was reaching for it when my phone rang. An unknown number. Josie? The voice was young, nervous. It's Leo Vance. I know I'm not supposed to call, but I had to ask. Did you really mention Rider 11B to the board? Leo. Brilliant kid, top of his class at Stanford, the only one who had ever bothered to read every single line of the PAT filings. The only one who had asked about the unusual covenant in the environmental compliance section. I might have, I said, my voice carefully neutral. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Holy, I mean Josie. Do they have any idea what that means? What do you think, Leo? I think, his voice dropped to a whisper, I think they just handed you the kill switch. The conservation covenant. If the primary architect's operational oversight is terminated without documented cause related to safety or environmental malpractice, all mining permits associated with the patent are immediately suspended pending a full federal review. Smart kid. Smarter than the entire TerraVex board combined. Josie, you still control the land. They fired the one person who the line went dead. Either Leo had been cut off or someone was already listening. It didn't matter. The seed was planted. Soon, others on the inside would start digging, finding the clause I had insisted on during the desperate negotiations 5 years ago, back when they were on the verge of bankruptcy and too desperate for my solution to read the fine print. I opened the binder, running my finger over the passage. It was written in dense, impenetrable legalese, overlooked by corporate lawyers who assumed no company would be stupid enough to fire their chief geologist without cause. But Julian, in his arrogant crusade for efficiency, had done exactly that. No performance issues cited, no misconduct, just restructuring. My phone buzzed with one final message. This one from an anonymous, encrypted email address. They are trying to bypass your protocols and start drilling. The environmental monitoring satellites will perform their weekly rescan in 7 days. They will detect the unauthorized activity. Use the time wisely. A friend who should have spoken up in that room. It had to be Howard Vance. He was the only other person on that board with enough technical knowledge to understand the implications of Rider 11B 7 days. Time enough for Julian to announce his brilliant new strategy to investors. Time enough for him to promise record-breaking yields. Time enough for him to drill his own company into a grave. I closed the binder and walked back to the window. The doubt was gone, burned away by the certainty of what was to come. I wasn't a casualty of restructuring. I was a force of nature they had just unleashed. 14 days, that's all I needed. 7 days for them to create the evidence and 7 days for the world to see it. 14 days to watch them realize that saying thank you in that boardroom wasn't submission. It was a declaration of war. 5 years ago, TerraVex Minerals was dying. Their primary copper mine had run dry, the stock was in freefall, and the board was 24 hours from declaring bankruptcy. Their only hope was a massive, untapped lithium deposit in the Nevada desert, but it was locked beneath an ecologically fragile basin. The EPA had blocked every proposal, and rightly so. Traditional mining would have poisoned the entire region's water table. I remember the emergency meeting at midnight on a Tuesday. The air in the room was thick with the smell of stale coffee and desperation. We need a miracle, the then CEO, a decent man named Alan Murdoch, had said. He was an old-school engineer who respected the earth as much as the balance sheet. Josie, that radical process you've been theorizing, Ethelred. Can it really extract the lithium without touching the aquifer? It can, I had said, but I need 2 things. Complete operational autonomy. No committees, no budget cuts, no oversight from suits who think geology is just about hitting rocks with a hammer. Just me and my team. And I need something else. Alan had leaned forward, his eyes tired but sharp. Name it. I want a conservation covenant, Rider 11B, written into the core of the patent and filed with the EPA. It will stipulate that if my operational oversight is ever removed without documented cause of environmental malpractice, the mining permits become void. Instantly, the room had exploded. Legal called it corporate suicide. Finance said no geologist was worth that kind of leverage. But Alan looked at the ticking clock, at the billion-dollar deposit that was their only salvation, at the company he'd built from the ground up. Draw up the papers, he'd commanded. That's how Rider 11B was born. buried on page 214 of a 300-page environmental impact report that no one would ever read again. The lawyers were too exhausted to fight, too panicked about insolvency to scrutinize every clause. I built the Ethelred process in 9 months. It wasn't just a method. It was a living system, a form of technological symbiosis with the Earth. It saved TerraVex. Alan called me a miracle worker. But Silicon Valley has nothing on the mining industry's short memory for heroes. Now, sitting in my apartment 5 years later, I pulled up the original filing. My lawyers had been meticulous. The language was as solid as Precambrian bedrock. In the event that the architect's operational oversight of the system is terminated, suspended, or transferred without documented performance-related cause pertaining to environmental or safety violations, all federal and state mining permits associated with this patent shall be immediately and automatically suspended. The kicker was in the definition of system. Not just the extraction process itself, but the entire ecosystem of real-time seismic monitors, groundwater sensors, and ecological safeguards built around it. I hadn't insisted on the clause out of paranoia, but out of pragmatism. I'd seen too many good scientists build sustainable solutions only to be pushed aside by corporate raiders once the profits were secure. The clause was my dead man's switch, filed away and forgot. Until today, my phone rang. It was Eris, my lead chem. Josie, something strange is happening. The Apex consultants are here, crawling all over the control center. But when they tried to access the core catalyst formulas, they hit a complete system lockdown. Not a normal firewall, one of the deep code locks you built in. I smiled. Those locks were tied to my biometric credentials, refreshed every 24 hours via a secure satellite link. Without me actively maintaining them, the system would begin its defensive protocols. How long until they get through? I asked. Get through, Josie. They can't even find the door. It's like the system knows you're gone and it's protecting itself. Not protecting itself, protecting the Earth. Another safeguard I designed during those caffeine-fueled months. The Ethelred process was more than software and chemistry. It was a digital fortress, and I was its only warden. Eris, listen carefully, I said. In about 36 hours, they're going to realize the production systems are running on cached authorizations. When those expire, Ethelred will demand primary authentication. Your authentication? Precisely. Document everything. Every panicked email, every ignorant command they try to input, but do not interfere. Let them discover the truth on their own. Josie, did you plan for this? I planned for the possibility of fools, I said. This is just one of those possibilities playing out. After we hung up, I went through the patent again. My 2019 self had been a paranoid genius. Every subsection had teeth. Every clause had consequences. The beautiful irony was that they had triggered it themselves. Firing me for restructuring was the exact scenario the contract specified. Julian Croft and his cost-cutting crusade had activated a covenant he didn't know existed in a report he'd never read, governing a system he fundamentally misunderstood. Another text came through, this time from a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Lowe, this is Marcus Thorne from Apex Extraction. We're experiencing some technical difficulties with the handover. We're prepared to offer a competitive rate for your consultation. The crony was already hitting a wall, already realizing that taking over my system wasn't like taking over a simple quarry. It was like trying to perform neurosurgery after firing the only neurosurgeon. I didn't respond. Let them sweat. Let them learn what Alan Murdoch had understood 5 years ago. Sometimes, one scientist is worth any leverage they demand. The days passed. The stock ticker for TerraVex remained stable. The market didn't know. Julian's story about aggressive new strategies was still selling. But deep beneath the Nevada desert, the Ethelred process was beginning its shutdown sequence. Not a violent crash. That would be too obvious, too easily blamed on a malfunction. Instead, it was a gradual hibernation. A slow retraction of the microinjection nozzles, a gentle rebalancing of the subsurface pressure that would look like 1,000 small, inexplicable glitches rather than one catastrophic failure. By the time they understood what was happening, by the time they traced it back to Rider 11B, it would be far too late. The 7th day arrived. The Moscone Center in San Francisco was packed. Julian Croft had called a special investor showcase to unveil his new, aggressive vision for TerraVex. I watched from my couch, laptop open to the live stream, a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands. Julian took the stage at exactly 10 a.m., his confidence a manufactured commodity. Behind him, a massive screen showed a sleek, simulated 3D model of the Nevada mine. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future of mineral extraction," he began, his voice slick with rehearsed enthusiasm. "Today, we show you transformation. As you know, we've recently restructured our division to bring in fresh, cost-effective methodologies. Change is essential for growth. Fresh methodologies. That's what he called bringing in his unqualified college buddy to dismantle my life's work. Now, let's go live to the Nevada site, where our new partners at Apex Extraction will demonstrate a 20% increase in production, right now." The screen behind him switched to a live feed of the control room. But instead of showing rising production numbers, it showed a screen full of red warning lights. The 3D model of the mine began to flash, with a single, ominous message pulsing in the center. "Structural subsurface instability DETCTD. Hibernation mode engaged. Authorization required." A nervous-looking Apex employee frantically typed at a console, but the message remained. "Just a minor data link issue," Julian said, his voice a little tight. "The system itself is." A new window popped up on the screen, visible to the entire auditorium and the thousands watching online. It was a direct feed from a public EPA monitoring site. "Warning, unauthorized drilling activity DETCTD ATTRAVX Site 7. Mining permit status. Pending immediate review under Rider 11." Be the auditorium filled with whispers. Phone cameras were already capturing the moment. From my couch, I took a sip of cold coffee. Julian's politician's smile was gone, his eyes showing the first cracks of genuine panic. "Technical demonstrations always have their surprises," he said, attempting a laugh that caught in his throat. "While our team sorts this out," but the audience of investors and journalists wasn't interested in his excuses. They were interested in Rider 11. My phone buzzed. It was Leo. "The whole site is in chaos. They're screaming at us to fix it, but we can't even access the hibernation protocols." Another buzz. "Eris, Julian just asked if we kept any override codes. For a geological failsafe system, the man is an idiot." The live stream became a slow-motion train wreck. A journalist stood up. "Mr. Croft, can you explain what Rider 11B is? And is it related to the recent departure of Dr. Josie Lowe, the architect of the Ethelred process?" The question hung in the air like a toxic gas. I watched Julian's mask slip, revealing the raw fear underneath. He knew. Maybe not the full scope, but he was beginning to understand. "Personnel changes are routine," he stammered. "Our systems are robust and not dependent on any single individual." It was the worst possible answer. Every geologist in that audience knew systems like Ethelred weren't just built. They were tended, understood, and respected by their creators. Firing the architect was like trying to tell a volcano it was being restructured. The demo never recovered. The call came at 8 a.m. the next morning. It was Linda from HR. "Josie, good morning. There seems to be some confusion regarding your recent transition." Transition, not termination. The language of retreat. "I don't believe there's any confusion, Linda. The board was very clear. Position eliminated." "Yes, but we've been reviewing the circumstances. Mr. Croft acknowledges the restructuring may have been premature. We'd like to discuss bringing you back." The first admission of their colossal mistake. "In what capacity?" I asked. "Chief geologist, of course. Your original position, we could even discuss a 15% salary increase." 15%. They were panicking, but they still thought this was about money. "Send the offer in writing," I said, and hung up. The next call came an hour later. It was Julian himself. Low. His smooth presenter voice was gone, replaced by something raw and jagged. "Name your price." "My price? Don't play games. The system is hibernating. The EPA has frozen our assets. You hold the key." "Fine, you win. What do you want? A board seat? Stock options? You think this is about money," I said. "Everything is about money. Then you have learned nothing. I built Ethelred to prove something, that we could power our future without poisoning our present. You reduced my life's work to a line item on a spreadsheet. Spare me the idealism. You've committed corporate sabotage. I did nothing. The Earth is operating exactly as designed, according to the covenants your legal team signed. The fact that you never understood those covenants, never valued the architect enough to keep her, that's not sabotage. That's consequence. You planned this. I planned for the possibility that a man like you might one day run TerraVex. That short-term profit would eclipse long-term survival. That building miracles would matter less than cutting costs. So yes, Julian, I planned. The question is, what's your plan now? Silence. On the other end of the line, I could hear the faint, frantic murmur of other voices. The board was in the room with him, listening, panicking. Legal counsel was probably having a coronary. "Come back," he said finally, his voice strained. "Your terms, full restoration, a public apology, whatever you need, just come back and wake up the system." No, Josie, be reasonable. You're angry, I get it. But you're about to destroy a $3 billion company out of spite. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply allowing the natural consequences of your actions to unfold. The system recognizes its architect. When you fired the architect, you severed that connection. That's not spite. That's geology. We'll sue you. We'll ruin you. Please do, I said, my voice calm. Make public the covenant that gives me oversight of your core asset. Explain to your shareholders how you fired the one person who could legally operate your only profitable mine. I'm sure the stock market will respond well to that level of transparency. More muffled arguing in the background, the sound of an empire crumbling under the weight of its own arrogance. 48 hours, Julian said finally, his voice thin. That's when the quarterly report is due. 48 hours until we have to admit to the SEC that our primary asset is frozen. 48 hours until the stock craters and everything collapses. 43 hours and 16 minutes, actually, I corrected him. But who's counting? This is extortion. This is business, Julian. Isn't that what you told me efficiency was all about, making hard choices? Well, you made your choice. You chose to cut me. Now you're learning I wasn't the fat, I was the bedrock. And once you fracture the bedrock, the whole mountain comes down. Then what do you want? If not money, if not your position. What? I smiled, though he couldn't see it. I want you to understand, I said. Some things, once broken, can't be put back together. The coffee shop on Market Street was neutral ground. I arrived 10 minutes early, choosing a table in the back. Elias Vance, Howard's older brother and the former VP of Sustainable Development at Terravex, walked in exactly on time. Julian had fired him 6 months ago for philosophical differences. Translation: Elias had argued that strip mining was a morally and financially bankrupt strategy. "Josie," he said, sitting down. He looked older, but the weariness in his eyes had been replaced by a sharp, focused energy. "You look good for someone who just triggered a geological event in the stock market." "I didn't trigger anything," I said. "I just let gravity do its work." He laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Their stock is already down 30% on the EPA news alone. When Voltaic Automotive officially walks, it's over." "You didn't come here to give me a market report, Elias." "No." He pulled out a tablet and opened an encrypted file. "I came with an offer." The message was from the CEO of Elementum Holdings, Terravex's main competitor, a company built on a genuine commitment to sustainable extraction. Their legal team has been analyzing Rider 11B for 72 hours straight. Their conclusion: you don't just have leverage, you own the kill switch. The entire Ethelred patent is worthless without you. They want to buy the patent rights, Elias continued. Full transfer, clean sale, $1.5 billion. The number hung in the air, dense and heavy. $1.5 billion, not for a company but for a single patent, for an idea I'd sketched on a napkin during a geology conference years ago. "It's a transformative offer," Elias said, "for you and for them. With Ethelred, they don't just compete with Terravex, they erase them. And you. What's your angle in this?" He smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "I'm their new head of strategic acquisitions. This will be my first and sweetest acquisition. But more than that, I want to watch Julian Croft explain to the world how his efficiency crusade handed his biggest competitor the keys to the future of energy." "There are conditions," I said. "Of course. I retain architectural oversight on all projects using the process, not as an employee, as a consultant, anticipated and approved. They want the architect, not just the architecture, and my team at Terravex, the real scientists. Elementum offers positions to all of them with their salaries matched and their lost stock options compensated." Elias nodded. "Mass talent acquisition. They'll love it. One more thing, the timing. This doesn't happen quietly. When the EPA officially announces the permanent shutdown of the Terravex site, that's when Elementum announces the acquisition. Maximum impact. Jesus, Josie. You're not just burning a bridge, you're salting the earth." "Julian wanted efficiency," I said. "This is efficient. One patent transfer, one press release, one moment of absolute clarity about the value of what he threw away. And," I added, pulling out a document I had prepared, "there's a final condition. $200 million of the sale will be placed into an independent trust, the Low Legacy Fund, dedicated to restoring land damaged by reckless mining operations and funding research into sustainable geology. Elias stared at the document, then back at me, a look of profound respect in his eyes. This was never about revenge, was it? It was about setting a new precedent. It was about architecture, I said, building something better from the rubble. The press conference was a circus. Julian Croft stood before a wall of Terravex logos, his smile a brittle facade. I watched from my laptop, the signed Elementum contract a comforting weight on my desk. He was lying through his teeth, claiming the shutdown was a temporary, voluntary measure to recalibrate for even greater efficiency. The reporters were like sharks sensing blood. Is it true that Dr. Josie Lowe holds the key to restarting operations? Can you comment on the legality of Rider 11B? Then the kill shot from a journalist at TechCrunch. Mr. Croft, I have a source inside the EPA confirming that due to unauthorized drilling and a complete lack of qualified oversight, your permits for the Nevada site are being permanently revoked. The room erupted. Julian's face went white. The mask didn't just slip, it shattered. I picked up my phone and made 3 calls. First, to Elementum's legal team. Execute the transfer. Second, to Elias. Release the announcement. Now. Third, to my lawyer. File the trust paperwork. It took exactly 90 seconds. Every screen in that press conference, every phone in every journalist's hand, lit up with the breaking news alert. ELEMENTUM HOLDINGS ACQRES AETHLRED patent 41.5B from architect JOSIE LOWE. The split screen showed the chaos of Julian's failed press conference on one side and the smiling, confident face of Elementum's CEO on the other. By market close, Terravex stock was trading at 10 cents a share. It was over. The final meeting took place in the same sterile boardroom where I'd been fired. The glass table now seemed to reflect the company's hollowed-out state. The board was there. Julian was not. We're here to discuss the future, the interim CEO said. Terravex has no future, I corrected her gently. Not as it is. I slid a proposal across the table. It wasn't an offer to buy their remaining assets. It was an offer from the Low Legacy Fund. We will take over the now defunct Nevada site. We will assume all environmental liabilities. In exchange, you will liquidate the company and provide full severance to every employee you have left. We will turn your greatest failure into a living laboratory for ecological restoration. A monument, not to your greed, but to the Earth's resilience. They had no choice. It was either that or drown in a sea of lawsuits. 2 weeks later, the news broke that Julian Croft had been arrested on federal charges of securities fraud and catastrophic violations of the Clean Water Act. His mugshot showed a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. That evening, I stood not in my apartment, but on a ridge overlooking the Nevada basin. My team, now Elementum's team, was with me. Below us, the first phase of the restoration project was beginning. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Alan Murdoch, the old CEO. I always wondered why you insisted on that clause, Josie. Now I know, you weren't just building a system, you were building a fortress. I smiled. The real victory wasn't the $1 billion, though the fund would do immense good. It was this. The chance to continue building. The quiet satisfaction of knowing that we had not just won, but we had healed. The world wouldn't remember Julian Croft's name, but they would see this valley, once threatened, now thriving. And they would know that an architect had protected her creation. I had gotten my revenge, and it was the greenest, most constructive revenge imaginable. The Earth had the final say.